Hello everyone, and welcome to another video. So here we are with the final for this series. I'm going to be working on the guy to the right, that is the Dwarven Merchant, that's what it said on the packet at least, by Reaper Miniatures. So yep, as you may or may not have noticed, I have been doing this as a series to basically do these three miniatures concurrently, and there is now a video that has been made of each detailing how I did it. Essentially, my goal here is to focus on methods and techniques that are to serve as an introduction to painting miniatures for something like D&D, Pathfinder, or any other tabletop RPG that you wish to partake. So to start with, I'm going to get a bit experimental and just try some colours on the miniature just to see how it looks. And yeah, just, this is the early base coating, so just getting a feel for how the paint flows. So I'm doing the vest waistcoat, just a leather colour, because that's what I assume it is. And the colour I'm using is terracotta from Vallejo Game Colour. So it's pretty simple, just, yep. As these sorts of things obviously require multiple layers to establish a solid base coat, which is fine, it'll just take a bit, and yeah. So for the first part, good bit of this, I do a lot of humming and hawing about what colours I end up using, and we will go into more detail further on as we start to nail down exactly what we want to use for this. Okie dokie, so yep, I've decided I want this guy to be pretty bold and ostentatious, so he is going to have a red outer jacket. As you may or may not have observed with the paladin / fighter video, the red in this case will take a couple of good passes to come through and layer properly. So we're just going to noodle that on until it starts to look a bit more solid. Yep, so that's also the collars as well, and you can see that I'm not being too concerned about where I hit with the paint right now, because all I'm doing right now is just establishing base coat areas, getting a feel for how the miniature is going to turn out later on. Yep, as I mentioned, the red in this case is going to require multiple layers in order for it to cover nicely, so we're just going to do that. Okay, so this is the, again, I'm just being a bit experimental, and you may have noticed, the sharp-eyed amongst you, that the colour I'm painting on his shawl right now does not match what's in the final result. This is because, like I said, I'm just blocking down colours to figure out what the miniature is meant to look like. So after some time I decided that this colour is absurd with what I was going for, and I opted to instead go back to just a plain white to just make it a bit more uniform in his in the collection of colours that this guy is wearing, because I thought the blue and the red would clash a bit too much in a way which I did not really appreciate. Because yeah, generally I like reds and browns all together in one figure. Like having the blue cloak by itself is just completely out of place. So yep, basically just base coating. This is honestly the vast majority of the work when it comes to painting, is just getting those base colors down. you can see me in a lot of instances just stop and contemplate what I'm looking at. This is just me, if I'm going to get into my process, just looking at the miniature and deciding what there I go. That's where I made the decision to change the color of the cloak. Yeah, that's basically my process. Just paint for a bit, look at it, and picture it in my mind's eye when it's finished, and decide what I want it to look like. And in this case, you can see me just stare at the cloak, the shawl, whatever it is, not really be happy with it, and then opt for a different color in the end. So yeah, we're going to basically go for a reds and browns for the main body, and a white cloak and a white hat, which honestly makes him look kind of well, I don't know what the best word for this is. Gangster, for lack of a better word. And for the turnbacks and cuffs on the jacket, I decided to paint them the same colour as the inner jacket. And obviously the plumage is red, just to get that similarity with the cloak. It's not the cloak, the jacket. Now, just like with painting whites on the previous videos, the getting the cloak and hat up to that nice off-white is going to take time. It's going to take many passes in order to establish that colour. He also obviously has a cross belt too, and I decided to just, you know, minimize the amount of colors on the model, so I ultimately went with that. Painting it the same white color as the shawl and hat. As you can see, I'm beginning the base coat of white over the khaki on the hat and shawl, and you'll notice that later on down the track I decided to change this up again due to me not liking the way it looked. Keep an eye out for that. Okay, so the white is pretty much done, but I also am getting to the stage where I'm going to apply my first wash. So I also, while I was here, I hit the headband with a layer of the terracotta as well, and just redefined the plumage on the feather hat feather, whatever, just to make sure the colour is nice and even before the wash goes down. And here we go. Just all of the brown shaded colors are down and the washes are being applied. So pretty much just like any other miniature at this point. Just also the same way as I've done the elf and the fighter. Just, yep, all over wash, and we'll come back to it and start picking out details. Okay, so as I mentioned previously, after the wash went down, I decided I didn't like how the shawl, the hat, and the jacket turned out with the wash, so I opted to repaint everything and do the shading by hand. I generally only do this when I feel as if I can achieve a better result with using paint mixing and establishing gradients on the actual model itself. Any other time I usually just let the wash work its magic. This is especially true when you've got more dirty or more fine detailed models rather than just large flat surfaces and open cloaks and billowy clothing, which generally do need a more finely painted gradient to look good. Okay, so what I've done now is I've made a mix 50-50, the off-white color and the khaki color to get up a halfway tone between them, and I'm just going to layer that into all the areas where I think there should be more shade. And I'm not going to be too worried about making a mess here, because I'm going to go back and clean it all up later. At this stage, the important thing is just establishing those shade areas. The midtone areas and the highlights can be re-established later, so just like any painting, start with the deepest layers and work your way out. Okay, so we've laid down our shades. Now it's the time to re-establish the base coat. So oh yep, of course. I also need to shade the red on the cloak, and as you can see how it folds, it bends in. So that's the red shade is just the base red mixed with a brown. And while that's drying, as I mentioned just a second ago, I'm working on re-establishing the midtones. And obviously, since I made quite a mess of that headband with the shading, I'm just going to quickly re-establish it with the original color. And there we go. As I was talking about, there's our re-established midtone. So the majority of the color is going to be re-established, with only the recesses remaining the shaded area, well, the shade obviously. Like, you've probably seen this dozens of times at this point, heard me say it, so yeah, it shouldn't be much of a surprise now. And there we go, there is the highlighting. So again, just finding the sharpest edges and sharpest creases of this cloak, and just adding a line. I also added in white highlights to all those little stitches as well. And for things like the headband and I think to a lesser extent the plumage, I'm also going to reapply the shade, but just be very careful, and if I make a mistake like you just saw there, immediately clean it up to prevent it from staining the hard work we already spent a lot of time laying down. And once again, if you saw the video on the elf and get how to paint a cloak, I'm doing a similar process for the shade in the jacket. I am blending thin layers of the red over the shaded areas to try and get to work hiding the transition from the shade area to the base tone area. And of course, putting in some shade highlights as well, some more broader highlights. So this is just gory red with a highlight red mixed in. Just going to noodle away at this until we're happy with the result. And this includes all of the red parts of the model. And while we're waiting for things to dry, we'll obviously do various other bits and pieces around the miniature, such as the fixing the vest, well, rather layering the mid-tone of the vest in again, and other bits and pieces. So this is pretty much the most, I don't know, eclectic stage of the painting. Just a mixture of relayering the colours once they've dried, highlighting the areas that have dried, and just keep on, you know, working away at it until all the various bits and pieces are done. Honestly, this is pretty much my extremely rote process for getting a miniature done. There's probably faster ways to do it, because my way is basically as I was taught, quite traditional, with, you know, making use of acrylic paints and certain washes. Whereas things like contrast, perhaps in many respects, those can speed up the process a lot more dramatically. But I still believe that contrast does have its limitations, especially with shading whole miniatures. I find that I don't trust it as much as just putting down my own paint manually, but I suppose that's just born of past experience. So yeah, now that a lot of the base coats have been re-established, we can see the miniature really starting to take shape. Basically, apart from the face, which doesn't have any color on it, or the any of the flesh, and the walking stick he has sort of swaggered across his chest, he's looking fairly done, which is good, because this is the part where you start to see the final result emerge from the mess of poorly applied paint and primer and plastic. You start to see the actual product that you're aiming to produce. And that's another thing you need to be wary of. Occasionally, while you're painting miniature, you'll just be working away at it, then you'll find, hey, that's a part that makes sense to be the same color as another part of the miniature. You see, you've got the little flappy bits down the bottom of the under the, I don't know what the word is, under the vest. Maybe it's just a leather overcoat or undercoat or something, I'm not sure. But having the same set of frills coming out of the cuffs made me think that, you know, for symmetry's sake, they should be the same color. I don't know if that's necessarily correct, but it looked good to me, and a color needed to go there that wasn't flesh, so I did it anyway. So one of my pet peeves about this miniature were the little stitches all over the place. There was obviously an invitation to do something fancy, like, some coloured thread or whatever, but I didn't feel like it. So I just ended up hitting all of the little threads with a little bit of red, just to hopefully help them stick out a little bit. Later on, you'll see I try to do something fancy with a lot of the details on the cuffs and the buttonholes, but I'm not entirely sure if it necessarily worked out the way I wanted to, but we'll see. So, as you can see, just going through the same process of just reinforcing the shades and shading what needs to be done. Like, for example, trying to create a bit more depth between the collars and the shawl. The annoying thing about this miniature is that it's quite difficult to work your way into the detail between the wide brim hat, the collars, so his face is difficult to access, as you'll see later. So yeah, this entire process can be quite therapeutic. I definitely find that it's best done with, at very least, catch up with, have something going in the background. That tends to work for me. Like I think at the time I was watching Netflix or something. Yeah, that's why I don't do audio recording live, because you don't want to hear what I'm listening to, and I'm sure that'll set off all of YouTube's algorithms. But yeah, music, podcasts, whatever you like. This is a very time-consuming process, just jumping between this bit and that bit, getting the highlights down, waiting for things to dry, often just getting up, taking a break. So yeah, it's a marathon, not a race. That's the mindset you kind of have to get into for miniatures painting. Don't expect to blitz through it. Just what I find works is you have a hobby space, and you leave it set up for a project, and every now and then you sit down and do a bit of the project. This works even better, like I said, if you're also working on, well, I must say working, getting through like a TV series you want to watch, that sort of thing. Alright, so obviously we're getting pretty far along. Just you saw me put some highlights down for the plumage. And yeah, we are, our guy is starting to look pretty boss. As you can see, as well, I reset the camera because it was starting to not work. Like I think I've said it previously, but I'm still not very good at this whole YouTube business and getting footage down. But I think the current setup that I have now is probably one of the better ones I've had. So it's good that you can see what I'm doing, and I hope to keep it up. As I work on new projects, I'll find something worth recording and, you know, build tutorials for things that I haven't seen much of, or just for the hell of it, really. Alright, anyway, see, we've just made some effort on the his walking cane. So I decided a nice finished black wood, and I'm also going to paint some wood grain on it, but of course that obviously has to dry first. And here we are, onto the metallics at last. So as I mentioned, well, I think I mentioned it. I'm not entirely happy with how they turned out, but I did my best. So to start with, most of these metallics are going to be gold, but using my usual method, I'll start by painting every metallic area with gunmetal, just to act as a underpaint for the like gold and brass colors that I'm going to use in a sec. Metallics at this stage I think are a bit risky because they're easy to mess up and get on your previously completed work. So I think patience is definitely a virtue here. And yeah, you'll notice that if you look closely at the cuffs and the jacket, the buttonholes have some weird design. So what I tried to do later on is paint those metallics as well to make them look like, hey, this is gold thread or something pretty fancy for this fine upstanding dwarven gentleman, but I don't think that necessarily worked because the brush I was using, basically I have a collection of beaten to death brushes. Yeah, you can see how badly I screwed up there, and I'm just letting it slide apparently because I'm lazy. So yeah, I'm using these beaten up brushes for my metallics because metallics are very hard on brushes. A lot of the mica and other metallic flecks in the mixture, they really do damage the bristles and just generally reduce the lifespan of a brush. So I generally only use beaten up brushes for metallics. And there you can see what I mean. Those little weird designs are getting metallic coated as well. Of course I miss a fair bit due to the kind of crappy nature of the brushes and my own, quite frankly, failing eyesight. This is why I really have to remember to use my OptiVisor occasionally because I can actually see what's going on. Like, one thing that isn't really discussed about, what a phrase, discussed is the having good eyesight in this hobby really does make a difference. You can see details that other people have missed. Often I find myself squinting when trying to look at an unpainted model to see what a detail is even meant to be, which is honestly, given it's like a 3D object in space that's right in front of you, it's just a very strange feeling for me. Yeah. Alright, and as promised, on to the flesh. So I usually paint the eyes because I'm used to it and I'm a psychopath, but this time I'm not because I've decided that the combination of the wide brim hat and the beard is just a bridge too far for even reaching them. So I'm just going to let the natural shade of the hat hide the fact that I haven't painted the eyes. Obviously, of course, once all the metallics are down, I'm going to quickly give them all a little wash just to hopefully give them some depth and hide any mistakes in some respects. Like, say for example, just maybe disguise a little bit of the fact that I overran the metallics on a couple of those areas. But, you know, might fix them up later, might not. I don't remember. Anyway, so yeah. Anyway, like all paints, it takes many passes to get an even coat, and you can see that happening with the flesh right there. And obviously while that's happening, I'm also doing the base. And since he's walking on a cobblestone street, honestly I'm basing him pretty much the same as the other two in this series, just dark grey, a neutral grey, dry brushed, and dry brushed with a light grey afterwards. Anyway, I think at some point I may have actually washed the face and I've forgotten to record it. Just assume that I did. Because you can see there I'm just relayering the flesh after a wash. And soon I'll highlight it, no doubt. Sorry, this is what you get when you record your audio after the fact. Just trying to remember in what order this was done. Oh, and of course the beard. This guy's going to have a brown beard. And obviously did the face first and then the beard next, because that's the more like raised detail. Again, start in, work out, so you don't have to paint around the work you've done previously. And one of the things that usually happens towards the end of my projects, like almost a finishing move, if you will, is to blackline the base, because I am a very big fan, like stylistically, I prefer the black rimmed base approach. Just kind of a, you know, GW early 2000s habit that I got into, and I kind of like it. And obviously, yeah, just a couple more things to do, such as the flesh, and I think I highlight the hands, but I may have missed it. And obviously, just what I'm doing there is nothing fancy. I'm just trying to sketch in some wood grain using the base color with a bit of white mixed in to try and give the impression of a little bit of texture. Obviously using the finest brush I can for this. And finally the hair. Again with painting the hair, roots and tips. That's where you want to put your highlights. It doesn't necessarily work like anything else. And oh yeah, one thing I decided to do at the end was just put a little more luster on some of the gold, because the wash did kill a lot of it, so I'm just narrowly, on a fairly dry brush, just running it across the top of where all of the gold features are. Just, you know, make it a bit more belangin', so to speak. And there would be the highlights for the moustache and beard. And so we are done. As you can see, you've got our dwarven merchant standing alongside presumably the two adventurers that, I don't know, he has hired to, or rather he sells things to. Who knows how this little relationship dynamic works. Yeah, gotta say, he's a very characterful figure. I think he was my least favorite to paint, though he was my favorite to look at. Because you don't, like, most of the time you have adventurers in, you know, striking a pose or being ready to do damage to something, but no, this guy's just clearly an important dwarf about town. He is clearly successful, and he has clearly a lot of wealth, and he doesn't mind showing it, so good for him. And he's clearly earned it in his own way, because if you look at his leg, he's got a little peg leg there, so he had to work to get here. Hustle and grind, etc., except in the fantasy sense. Anyway, so I think that's pretty much done for this series. Yep. Again, never gonna ask you to subscribe. If you seriously get stuff from this, hey, that's the intent. If not, oh well. Anyway, I'm never gonna make money from YouTube. What would I do? Earn tens of dollars? No, I have a real job, sorry. This is just my hobby. Alright, anyway, that's pretty much all, so I will talk to you later. Farewell.